Hi, and welcome to the Tattoo Teacher Podcast, where we get to know the person behind the professional, going below the surface of what we see. Join with me as I talk with some incredible individuals from around Australia and the globe. My guest today is Stephen Anderson, a fellow design teacher and podcaster. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Stephen as much as I did. Well, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good ever what time of day it happens to be that you are listening to the Tattoo Teacher Podcast. On this afternoon's episode, I have Steve Anderson. Now, we are kindred spirits. We're both DT teachers. We've been around the sun a few times, and we've had a chat before on the Data Queensland podcast. So if you ever want to hear some DT stuff and some creative thinking and design thinking, that's the one to go to. So put that into your podcast rotation. But Stephen, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
You, Phil, I'm really looking forward to it. I can't wait to see where this little trip we're taking takes us.
Mate, absolutely. Now, look, I could give your resume bio. I could say you've done this, you've done that. The only thing I will say, and I actually want to discuss it later, is you were a recipient of the Cooper Hewitt Award a few years ago, as I understand. So I'd love to get into that a little bit later. But how would you introduce yourself to someone?
That's really interesting. I'm trying to think of the last time that I actually had to sit down and introduce myself to someone. I do call myself a design teacher. Honestly, I don't think I'm social enough to think back to someone new that I've met recently that I've actually got into that conversation. But in saying that, teachers as a standard will not, unless pushed, say that what they do. I'm good enough at conversation to be able to talk around the what do we do stuff, but there's other stuff to talk about. There's so much other stuff than, hey, what do you do for a living? You know what I mean? So if I'm talking to people at an event, at an educational event, I definitely put the design in there because it's important, because many people don't either know or believe that it's a thing.
Yeah, look, I'd have to agree with you on quite a number of those points. One, yeah, they don't get design. They don't think it's important. But two, I think getting to know someone is so much more important than what do you do. And unfortunately, that's how society has started to define us. You are this or you are that. But part of what I'm doing on this podcast is actually sort of moving away from that and getting to know who each guest is. Obviously, their professional space and what they're doing, but more importantly, it leads me to my next very good question is, what is your why? Why have you done what you've done for so long?
I love Simon Sinek, but I'm not 100% sure I'm a big believer in his why. In my life, I feel that everything I've done my very best to do. And when you say how I've been doing things for so long, I don't think there's anything I've done that I've really done for that long, and maybe that's a bad thing on my part. I'm back now teaching. 2017, I came back to teaching. I originally taught in 1990. I think I got my diploma of teaching manual arts, and I went and taught for 2 years, and was transferred to Monto. My wife at the time said, if you're going to Monto, you go alone. And I chose to go back to the trades. So as I, didn't leave my family in Brisbane while I was living in Monto.
That's fair.
From there, which is fair. From there, I worked in the trade for a while. I drove a desk for a while. I'd started a business, and that took up a good 22 years of my life. I told myself when I started the business, because I loved teaching, that I'm going to go out and make enough money so that I can go back teaching. Well, that actually never happened because small business people don't make any money. But I did come out the other end to a point where teachers were actually starting to be paid pretty well. So it was worth my while. And the business I was in was construction, and I spent a lot of time on roofs, and my knees were giving out. So I thought maybe I should do something. And I went back to teaching. And I've been back here since 2017.
Mate,
Primarily working in a rural school.
mate, that's a fantastic journey, and that just shows, or it shows me, or it tells me that your heart has always been in teaching, but like so many educators out there, we have quite a winding road journey. Now, for me, I'm a trade background. I was, and I've said it on many podcasts already. School was a social experiment for me. I never thought I'd see myself on this side of the desk. That's for sure. And my goal: get a trade, and work, provide, do all that sort of stuff. And that was going to be what I was going to be. But as life turns out, I changed careers, I changed directions, I experienced different things, and I've been I did my trade, and I did well at it. I was taught by some exceptional tradesmen, and so I was pushed and I was challenged. So I had no other option but to be good at what I was doing. Otherwise, I was out the door. And so I guess I've brought that into my teaching. It's like, you might not be good when you start, but I tell you what, work hard and you're going to improve. And is that something that the experiences that you've journeyed through, is that what you bring into teaching? Is that what you communicate to these young men and women that you're talking to?
Look, I think so. My experience was a little bit different to yours. I was a really bad apprentice. Some of the people I work with talk about new teachers as being, what does he call them? Generation Me. And I, during my apprenticeship, was very much a Generation Me type of personality because it wasn't about learning. It was. I think my apprenticeship was probably more a social outing than my schooling was. My schooling was never a pleasant thing for me. I didn't enjoy it, and I got out as quickly as I could. But my apprenticeship, I did enjoy, but I wasn't good at it, and I wasn't a good employee. And it wasn't until after I finished that actually after I finished that, I did the let's get married thing and let's have kids and all that sort of stuff. And that's when my methods, I guess, changed. The way I looked at the things I did. And I went from being a very, very average tradesman when I finished my apprenticeship to, without blowing my own trumpet, because I've been told this by other people, to being an exceptional tradesman. And at that point, which was like 8 years after I finished my time, I said, hang on, I might try this teaching. And that's when I moved out of the trades. Obviously, I went back to it, but that learning for me was very much a trial and error type of thing. And I was lucky to find myself in an employment where I could trial and error. I worked for a waste company, and who would want to work for a waste company? Because I spent my time climbing in the back of rubbish trucks to fix them. But in the process of climbing in the back of these rubbish trucks to fix them, it became my job to improve the way they worked. So my skills as a tradesman went from not just welding a couple of pieces of metal together, but to understanding hydraulic rams and the way they moved, and the way the blades in the back of those trucks would tear up the back of the trucks, and what I could do to change the angles so that it didn't work. It didn't do as much damage. And from there, I moved on to another job, which again gave me the ability to extend myself. But in the process, I would stuff up. and it was my job to fix my stuff up. And that's that. And in doing that, you learn more. And this is the way I teach. Um, I sit next to a guy who has my name and has my looks in my staff room, and we're both virtually many of the kids cannot tell us apart, and we both teach the same subject. So his style is, watch me, this is what I'm going to do, and we're going to work our way through, and at the end, you're all going to have these perfect things. And my style is, this is what it's going to look like. Here's some of the really important things you need to know. Go for it. And maybe that's wrong, but I feel that the mistakes that these kids make, because I grab every one that they make and say, have a look at this, the whole class, see what we've done here, see what's gone wrong, don't make that mistake, and we'll move forward from there. So that's, I guess, my methodology of teaching, whether that be a year 12 engineering class or a year 7 ITD class. Let's make some mistakes.
Oh, look, again, I'm going to go back to this. We are so similar in the way we teach now, and I've been seeing this more and more recently. Is that there is no learning without failure. There is no learning without mistakes. And if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. Everyone, at whatever field that you wanted to go into, everyone should be successful. But we've got to make mistakes to learn. And I'm the same. Like my day one of my apprenticeship was I got pointed in the direction of a Bridgeport mill. I was given a set of verniers, engineer square, and a block of steel, and they said, "Go make this square." And my first thing is I turned the machine on, and the cutter was spinning the wrong way. So
that's never a good thing.
It's not a good thing. But thankfully, and by the sounds of it, your classrooms are probably very similar to the way I was taught. Now, look, I was in the sense of I was given an environment that was safe to fail. I was allowed to make mistakes to a point. Then they were corrected, but I was taught that this is what you got to do. This is what you got to do. This is how you learn from it. This is, and by the sounds of it, that's what you are bringing into your classroom every day.
I hope so. I really do, and I look at some of the kids that are doing the jobs that they're doing, that are doing the designs that they're doing. Can I tell you a story? This is a today story.
Absolutely.
I'm grade 7 design. They're calling it TMT or something now. I don't know what they call it, but as far as I'm concerned, these grade 7s have been told for the whole of their life that you got to do it right. It's got to be right the first time, and there's only one answer. So my whole story is about stuffing things up and enjoying that, and then making it better the whole way along. And we're working with a program you probably know called Tinkercad, which is an online modelling program, a very easy one that works great for the grade 7s. I moved them up to another one later on. And we make a ball-bearing maze, and their job is to modify this maze so that it is designed perfectly for a specific person, and that's their job. But to make the maze, there's the skill of making the maze on Tinkercad. So we run through how to do that. And there's one girl at the back of the class who really is an interesting young character. But she's come out at the end, and the maze that they're taught to make is a circular maze, and it starts at 80 mil, and every 10 millimeters you get another fence all the way in till it's nothing, and that's their job, to make this. So she sat down and with Tinkercad has investigated Tinkercad and come up with this thing that was definitely not circular, but was a maze. And I looked at it and I thought, that's great. So I've brought it up to the front of the class and put it up on the board and said to the kids, because I put them in classes and I can access their drawings, so I've put her drawing up on the board, and I've said, look at this. It's absolutely nothing like what I told you to do, is it? I said, but the design is to make a maze. And is that a maze? And has she looked at some different processes than we all have looked at? And I told them this is no one in the last 2 years in grade 7 has done anything like that. And I think that is creativity, and creativity is a really big part of design. So that is something fabulous. And all these kids are looking at me because this kid had gone totally and completely against what I said and had created something that looked nothing like. And it was also, we said, okay, let's print this. So I put it up on the board and said, start the print, and we put it into the slicer. And and then I turned it on the side and half, and it's about 20 mil above the ground. And I said, well, there you go. We got a bit of a problem there. We can't print in thin air. Maybe you should fix that next week and we'll have a shot at printing it. And she's going, can I come back at second break so that we can have a go at printing this? I said, certainly. Why not? Let's do it. Because I believe that's what design's about. Design's about opening your mind. And maybe she was just doing something to stir me up. I don't actually believe
Maybe.
it, but maybe she was. But now she's wanting to print this thing out, and she's wanting to do something. And she was one of the ones that showed up at the beginning of the class without a laptop and that type of thing. So, yeah, that's my story from today. So some days I have days that excite me a little bit, and today was one of them.
Mate, that is an absolutely fantastic story, because it gets to what design is about and what we're trying to teach these kids in design, with our design thinking and the design process, and instill creativity. Because as you and I know, there's no real right answer, or right, there's a process to get to the end goal, but not every process is the same, and the end is not necessarily going to look the same. And what we want as design teachers is, we don't want to give them a recipe. We want to give them a brief, and we want to give them creative freedom to solve the answer through their lens. And by the sounds of it, this young lady has done that. And what I would say is that you've probably put a spark in her, and possibly others, to take the risk to try something.
I hope so. I really do, because I think I've just said it in the last thing I said, but the problem these kids have is every teacher that they have and have had and will have, bar me, and you, is telling them that there's only one answer. The answer has to be right, and if you don't get it right on the first time, then you've done something wrong. And that's a really hard thing to break. It's a hard belief to say, hey, that's not necessarily true. I spend a considerable amount of time with my classes watching SpaceX rocket launches, and if they blow up, I cheer. Because you're only looking at 30 cents worth of acrylic here. This guy's just blown up a $220 million rocket, and this time it's better than last time. It's my love for Elon is well known at school, and I get many young men come and tell me that Teslas suck. But at least they now know, that Tesla's different.
Hey, and I could just imagine that you would have been just over the moon when they were able to capture that rocket in the arms. Now, I only saw a couple of photos and saw a couple of headlines, but the fact that that someone has had that creative thought to go, hold on, we need to be, and we can bring this into our teaching, and I'm sure you do. It's like, hold on. Every time we build a rocket, we shoot it up into space, and I shared something just recently. Currently, there's about there's a couple of thousand tons of space debris just floating around the orbit of Earth, and these guys have gone, well, that's really expensive. So how about it's got to come back anyway, and it's going to come back anyway. So how about we try and catch it?
Mm.
And they've managed to work that out. So I guess you've probably explained that to some of your students, like,
I
look
got
at
up in the middle of the night to watch the catch. I then took it to school the next day, and every class I had, it didn't matter if it was science or geography, got to watch that rocket launch. And in front of that grade 7 class, I actually had a cry, which um, which is something that a grumpy old bloke like me probably shouldn't do in front of a grade 7 class, but I did, and they saw that I thought it was important, and my comment to them was, "This is the future, and this is where you're going to live, even if I don't get to."
Yeah, well, and I think it's like it's one of those things where yeah, you mentioned you had a cry, and maybe it's something you shouldn't do, but the kids know how passionate
Mm,
you are about rocketry and the potential that it has, and the just everything that is behind it,
mm,
um, and I think that will, and by the sounds of it, with this young Year 7 lass, is sparking the interest, is sparking that I'm going to take a risk here. I'm going to push the limits just to see where they can go. Now, I mean, I remember as a teenager, I was pushing the limits to see how far I could get, but that was in a whole different sense. But
mm,
um, you know, again, I had some teachers who would allow that. Okay, let's see where the boundaries actually are. And like you said, she created this maze, but then when you went to print it, it was like, hold on, you've just made a little error here. The idea and the concept is fantastic, and the execution is pretty good. But let's just tweak this bit, and it's going to be phenomenal.
mm. Yeah.
So,
Actually, probably not the way I put it. Probably I said, we're going to print it out now, and then next week when we come back, we're all going to critique and work out how to improve it. Was what I've done, and she's all up for that. She's ready to take them on. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the next time we sit down with our Tinkercad. I'll have it printed up for them by then. Which I'm
so
another thing I'm very happy about. I bought myself a printer farm at the beginning of the year, so I've now got 6, 7 printers, where we used to have one. So the kids would get there and it'd be, I can't get to it. It takes too long. I've now got 7 printers, and they just walk out of the classroom, start their print happening, and away it goes. And doesn't that make a difference that they can actually see it starting to appear? And it's very cool.
yeah, absolutely. I've got the same thing. The school that I work at is I'm very fortunate that we have the ability to purchase quite a wide range of equipment, and the same kids, and I'm just like, here's the software. It's free download, so you can slice it and you can get it ready for me. I'll double check it,
Mm,
and then it's just giving them the autonomy to be creative and try something. Now, there's some stuff they go, "Can I print this?" And it's like, no, because that's
yeah,
just landfill, and we're not doing
yeah,
that. But
yeah.
the come to me with something that is maybe not necessarily beneficial, but something that has a little bit more value than just printing
Mm,
whatever it might be.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, and it gets the kids
But then
excited.
again, offering the prize of a retractable sword as the prize for the best design at the end of the 8 weeks is also an interesting way to.
And sometimes you got to do what you got to do to,
Mm,
to, to get to get them over the line. So
yeah,
and
yeah.
that's what we find. I mean, look, and every school is its own
Mm,
ecosystem, isn't it?
it is. It is for sure.
Now you've had this industry experience. So you started as a
Mm,
teacher, but then you've had this industry experience, and you've had a small business experience.
mm,
Then you've come back into teaching, but you've also had the fortunate opportunity, and you applied for a grant, you won said grant, and you spent I think it was from my recollection, it was 8 to 12 weeks at the Smithsonian under the Cooper Hewitt Award. Tell me a bit about that.
It's called the Cooper Hewitt Design Fellowship. It's offered by what is it called? The Department of Science, Science and Environment, offers a fellowship once a year. I won the 2023 fellowship. The 2024 and 2025 fellowships have just been announced, and so I went into at the beginning of this year in 2024, and so I arrived in New York. That's where the Cooper Hewitt Design Museum. It's the National Design Museum, and part of the Smithsonian group, and it's on 81st Street and 5th, which overlooks Central Park in New York. So it's pretty prestigious. It's the museum itself was originally what was it? It was the home or mansion to Andrew Carnegie, the steel baron. And in itself, it is a design creation. It was the very first domestic house in the world to be built with a steel frame. It is the very first domestic house in the world to have an elevator, and it's just an amazing building. It really, truly is. He moved in. He had it built in 1907, moved in 1911, and that from that time on was when he did all of his philanthropic. What's the word? I don't know.
Philanthropic?
Philanthropic.
Gave his money away.
He gave his money away. He was the first who said, "I've got too much money. I've made it all up until this point." He built libraries all over America, and he brought business people in, wealthy business people, and it's really quite cool. I'll tell you in a second, and talk to them about how to help the people of America, and that's where this museum began, if that's the word. My favourite room in the museum was Carnegie's study. He was a man of small stature. I think he was about 5'2". So as you walk into the room, the doors, every other door in the place is 10 foot high. But to walk into his study, the door is 5'10". So anyone under 5'10" has to duck to enter his realm. It's really a very cool place. Inside the room, it is there are many quotes written around the ceiling that are his. The way he lived, and don't ask me to repeat one of them, but they were all motivational quotes and about how, Andrew Carnegie was the person who Think and Grow Rich. He was the guy who funded the author to that book, and that guy, and I don't remember the name of the guy who wrote Think and Grow Rich, but he spent 20 years writing that book under the directions of Andrew Carnegie. So there's the history behind the museum itself. Somewhere in the 1970s, it found its way to the Smithsonian, and the Cooper Hewitt section is two ladies from about the 1930s who were very, very well off. Their father was a very well-off person, and they travelled the world collecting, artifacts from design, and they built such a collection they had to open a museum, and that museum stayed open for many years, but then it sort of closed, and in the 70s they Smithsonian took over the mansion and turned it into the Cooper Hewitt Design Museum, and took all of the artifacts that had been sitting in storage for 100 years, not 100 years, for 20 or 25 years, and brought them back and put them back on show. So now the museum itself is open to the public. has 3 levels. It actually has 5 levels. No one sees the top level because that's just offices. The lower level is and sort of an auditorium, a small auditorium, and a design studio. So we get kids from all over New York coming to the museum, and they get run through basically a design sprint in the morning, and they take them through one of the displays and say, here's what design's about. And then we go downstairs to a design studio and we do a little bit of designing. And second, third, and fourth levels are all display areas. But a lot of the museum has been left very close to the original, and it's just beautiful. No matter what displays they put in there, you can look around and see this 100-year-old architecture and this beautiful building. When I was there, the first floor had a graphic design display about symbols. The second floor had a textile design display about one specific textile designer whose name I have now forgotten, but was incredibly famous in the 50s, and many of the architectural designers of the time used her textiles for P&O used her textiles for the curtains throughout all of their fleet, and I could point to a dozen different major companies that used her textiles as their designs for their business. And then the third level was a display that held a display from a girl called Devlin. Okay, so it's Isabel Devlin. She is a designer of a stage designer, I guess is the right word.
Okay.
But her stage designs are just world known. Singers like Miley Cyrus, that level. So Katy Perry, that kind of level are her bigger ones, but she goes right down to Shakespearean. Well, it's not down. She also does Shakespearean stage shows. She does. There was a list of the displays that she'd done, and they were 3 shows a year for 20 years. And
Wow.
and you walked into this thing, and it was just amazing. I spent hours in there, and it had everything from her work from when she was a teenager and younger, right through to the last show she did, and to the point where wasn't long after I got there that I was giving tours of that level, because she was just incredible. And to top it off, she came to the museum while I was there, so I got to meet her. I got to all of her fans came to the museum, and that just sent everybody crazy, because it's a museum and you're supposed to be quiet, and there's lots of people. There's never lots of people there, so all of a sudden we got 300 people in this museum, all wanting to get into that studio I was telling you about. The Andrew Carnegie's study, and that would fit 75 people, so we had 150 people in line waiting outside, and then she gave a question and answer. So I got to that day I got to give 2 tours of the show upstairs. I got to sit through 3 of her question and answers, and it was just like a masterclass. It was just sitting in front of a true genius. The things that she knew, the way her mind worked was just incredible. As good as sitting through 3 dozen university lectures. She was just fabulous. And so that's the museum itself. I worked with the education section of the museum. So my job was to Well, look, I was made a part of the education department or section of the museum.
Okay.
When you go to one of these places, a fellow, which is what I was, and now am forevermore. Isn't that an exciting thing?
That's brilliant.
The a fellow is there to study. So 99 out of 100 people that walk through those doors sit off and do all of their study and will become and that's what they do. They're there to do their thesis or whatever they are doing. I wanted to become a part of the education department itself, and to a certain extent I did. I became a member of the team that ran the a youth program. So they go looking for um, sort of disadvantaged kids in New York that have got skills, and they give them basically an internship because the kids they pick are the type of kids who wouldn't be able to do this type of program because they need a part-time job,
Yep.
whether that be to help the family or whether that be to whatever. And so they basically pay them a part-time wage to come in every Wednesday afternoon and spend 3 hours in the design studio, and we teach them about design. And as well as that, we go on field trips where we see designers around New York, and as well as that, we go. We have designers come in and run projects for them. So I got to meet a good 8 of New York designers that aren't necessarily ridiculously famous, but are New York designers. And if you understand how hard it is to live in New York, they have to be making some money. And
Yeah. Like, what an
mm,
opportunity.
it was fabulous. It was truly fabulous. And what else? And yes, I got time to. How so New York got hit very hard by COVID. So the museum had only just, when I arrived, come back to 3 days a week where they would come in, because many of the people had actually left the city during COVID and
Right.
moved to other places. So they were commuting for 2 hours to get to the museum, and then 2 hours home. So the thought of coming back 5 days a week wasn't something that pleased any of them. So they only had 2 days that they had to be there. What's the word, in office, and that was Tuesday and Wednesday. Their third day they could choose. We're looking at a staff of 12 people, and me.
Okay.
So on the other 2 or 3 days, I was lucky to have or two people more often than not was what I had in the staff in the office at any one time. And so I had a lot of time to to look at, study, try and understand exactly what design is. And I spent 12 weeks there. I worked 5 days a week. My wife came with me. We lived in Harlem, which now that's an experience. That was very exciting. We on the weekends became tourists. So we have walked uh, hundreds of miles up and down the Isle of Manhattan because you get to see so much more, and we had so much time. We have ridden the subway at 11:30 at night into Harlem. We've you know we really had a great touristy time on the weekend, and I had a life-changing experience through the week. New York itself, I loved every minute of being there, have no intention in my entire life of ever going back. But I've come back, and the direction my life was taking is now almost polar opposite.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So that was my experience with the Cooper Hewitt Fellowship,
I,
and
that
I'm sort of looking over at my wife, wondering if I've missed anything. But no, she's not even listening to us.
that sounds absolutely amazing. And look, I've just like I've heard of the award. I've walked past the museum now. I spent a week in New York just before Christmas a number of years ago. I love the city. I went to as many museums as I possibly could get to, and art
Mhm.
galleries, because that's just how I groove when
Mm.
I love
Yeah,
seeing the culture, seeing the experiences, seeing things that we actually don't get, that don't
yeah,
actually travel to Australia. Um, and then just to, I didn't actually go into to the Cooper Hill, but I know exactly where it is.
mm,
I dare say I probably walked past it two or three
mm,
times. Um, but just that experience as an educator, as a designer,
mm.
as a tourist, what a fantastic opportunity. And I guess that's one of those other things that you now have, like you've, forget strings to the bow, like you've got like a whole barrage of bows that can't even cope with all the strings that you've just gained from 12 weeks in such an environment.
It's
um
yeah, it's a totally and completely different world. It truly is. Everywhere you turn, everywhere you look. Well, I'm at this moment. I'm living in a place called Nanango. Nanango is a population of 6,000 people. We have one traffic light and zero elevators. I took three of my kids down to Mansfield State High recently for a program they run, which is called Meet the Scientist, an after-school program, and these kids were just amazed. There was an elevator in one of the areas, and they're just looking around, are amazed at this school because Mansfield's an excellent school. It's got 3,800 kids, and it's just out of this world. So they loved it. I loved it, but it's nothing like what you run into when you go into New York.
no.
I went to visit one design school there. Um, went to visit a few design schools, but the two I'll tell you about. One is right in the Lower East Side, so that's right beside Chinatown, or it's Italy Town, or that area.
Yep.
The whole school is on one floor of a building. It has 450 kids, and the whole building is a school, but there's four different schools in this one building. And the bottom, they have a
Wow.
shared uh, gymnasium type thing. So the different kids from the different come down and go into there. And the so there's no grass. There's no um, it's just four walls, and welcome back, Cotter. That's what I was walking through,
Yeah.
exactly through those hallways, and that was that design excellence school in New York, and it was a public school, a chartered school, I think is the right word, and some really cool stuff they're doing there. Really, really impressive stuff. And one of the thing I think, the thing that stood out to me, I spent a day there, and I spent some time with the principal, and I spent some time with some of the teachers, and I sat in on a few classes. Um, but part of what the principal said to me, he said, I pull my people out of class one day a fortnight. And he said that is their education time. That is their professional development. I call it personal development because that's my belief. This is a personal thing. And one day, a fortnight, these teachers come out and they learn, and they go back and they pass that on to their kids. And it was just goosebumps thinking about that school. Another one that I went to was actually in was it wasn't in New York, it was in Jersey. And
Yep.
it was I guess another charter school, another excellence school. It had, as a part of just the things that schools have, to what's the best microscope you can get?
Electron.
More than electron. They had 2 electron microscopes. The guy we went in, the technician was there working these 2 electron microscopes, valued at $2.5 million each, telling me that, yeah, we're one of 2 schools in the world that have an electron microscope, and we've got 2. That's a bit of a flex for you. The
Absolutely.
I then went and sat in a few of the classes, and the kids, and interviewed a few of the kids. Actually did a podcast with 2 of them, and then killed my phone and lost the recording. These kids, as a part of their design, created a system where during parade, the students would be sitting in parade and using their phones, lifting them up and down. They would project a screen of Pong on the screen, and this side of the auditorium would lift their phones up and down, and theirs would go up and down, and this side would lift theirs, and they would play Pong. The whole audience was playing this game at the front of, and these 2 kids, seniors, they were grade 11 or 12. They were grade 11 when they did it. Wrote the programs and put together all of the gear and got the receptors up on the stage and got this thing working. Just astounding. But this was really leafy greens. This was your boys' grammar style of school.
Yeah.
They were super. But in saying that, they were still a public school. They were still a they still they weren't taking the money from the students, but each student had to apply to get in, and each student, when they got there, had to work harder than any of the kids I've ever seen. Their day was from 8 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon, and then they would go and do their extracurricular. And
Wow. Yeah.
just they were astounding. They were truly astounding. The one of the classes I sat in on was an art class where they were using AI and the goggles to create their art, so it was all virtual reality, and yeah, just really really exciting stuff.
But it sounds like such an amazing experience, and uh, amazing experience probably doesn't even scratch the surface
Mm.
of what you actually were able to see and do over those 3 months. Um, how what have you brought back? And I mean, look, you're at Nanango, a very small, small community. I mean, we look at New York City
Mm.
as such. We're looking at 20 to 30 million people, which is the population of Australia
Yeah,
in the size of an area of about
yeah,
Sydney.
yeah.
Um,
50 million people in the 50-mile radius.
yeah, and so you I guess there's just a concentration of talent, experience, resource. How were you able to distill that down to enhance what your students are able to learn?
Um, with all honesty, I'm not 100% sure I have. I right now I'm plugging my charger in because my laptop's about to run out. But
Oh, no problem.
I'm trying to get this going, and that disappeared. Beautiful. We're up and running again. Look, um, let's see. I'm I'm not
Or are you
100%
still
sure I have. Yeah,
are you still trying to
yeah.
actually process it?
Yeah, look, the processing that has been done, and one of them was the fact that I was in New York. And while in New York, walking to work, we lived far enough away from work that I would walk about 45 minutes there and 45 minutes home. And every day I'd try and take a different route so that I got to
Yep.
see more. And while I'm walking along, I would generally be listening to either a podcast or a book. And one of the books I was listening to was about where great ideas come from. And the big comment was that great ideas come far more often in high density places. Because if you are someone who truly loves to play a tiny ukulele, and there are 7 songs that you like to play, and only those 7. If you're living in a city of 20 million people, you'll be able to find a clique of people who want to play that ukulele and those 7 songs, and you'll be able to get together, and those people will get better at what they do.
Yep.
My love in life educationally is design and design thinking. I'm living in a town that does not see education in that way. So my decision has been to move back to the Big Smoke, even though both my wife and I actually don't want to live in the Big Smoke, because Big Smoke being Brisbane, but
Yep.
but that's 2.5 million people now, so that's a decent size.
Yeah.
So we are moving back there, and that will put, for me, in a position where I can be closer to and work more closely with the people who want to see some of the changes that I want to see happen. And that's one of the reasons I'm heading back. I think I'm doing a little bit strangely, but that's another story. That's been one of the big changes for me. I came back. I was back long enough. How long was I? Yeah, I was not back that long. I spent term 1 away in New York. I think it was week 8. No, it wasn't. It was about term 3, week 2. I walked into my deputy's office and said, "Look, this is going to be my last year here. It's time for me to move."
Yep.
And because what I learnt there and what I believe deep down inside does not correlate with the educational beliefs of the people that I'm currently working with. And the people I'm currently working with are beautiful people, have loved being there, have learned an incredible amount over the last 7 years, because this is my first, well, not really my first school, but it's pretty much my first school back. I spent 6 months at
Yep.
Woodridge, and I spent another 2 months somewhere else. But I've been here 7 years, and in that 7 years, I've learnt plenty. And now I move on to somewhere else where I learn more and different stuff.
Mate, that's such a fantastic way to look at it. And that way of looking at lifelong learning is what I know, and by the sounds of what you want to transfer to these children, these young men and women, these students that we teach, to go, you don't have to limit yourself. You don't have to be limited by others. You have there's so many options, there's so many pathways, there's so many availabilities, to find where you will reach success. And we, as you and I know, and as most of most of our audience are educators, that success looks different to everyone. Success is different. We teach individuals in a group setting, and we know each individual is going to succeed in their own way. And if we can be a part of that success, then I'm privileged to be in the room with them, to be able to help guide them on their journey. But it sounds like everything that you've done over your whole professional career, from the rapscallion apprentice, to the fellow in New York, to the teacher in Nanango, to whatever the next step is, back in Brisbane, all that you've learned over your life is only going to enhance the people that you interact with.
I hope so. I truly hope so. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what more to say to that than I really hope that's a true story. And funnily, you do, at this time of year, you do start to see the ones that are leaving, the ones that you've been with for the last 5 years, and you're just in the process of pushing them out the door, starting, and you're seeing them become real people, and you're having real conversations with them, and you're seeing a spark in their eye, and you're commenting on what a horrible kid they were to you in grade 9, and all of that sort of stuff. This time of year, you really do start to feel that, at least sometimes. It's a nice time of the year when the ones that are leaving and won't be back are walking out, and their heads are held high, and you think, oh yeah, maybe there was a little bit of me in that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Look, Stephen, I truly appreciate your time tonight. I mean, we're literally in the middle of term tonight,
Mhm.
and I appreciate your time, and I just want to ask you just a few more questions. I mean, your passion and your experience and your joy has come through over the last 55 minutes. But just to finish off, just a couple of questions, just to get maybe just a little bit more insight to who Stephen is. I'm going to ask you just a couple of questions just to round off this amazing conversation. The first one is, what is a challenge that you want to put out to people who are listening? Could be big, could be little.
Okay. My challenge. Oh, that's interesting. Do I have a challenge? My challenge is to make a mistake.
I love it.
Allow yourself to make a mistake, and see how much difference that can make for you. And if you do that, maybe you'll be able to pass that thought on to your students, because too many of us want to look infallible in front of our students. And if we look infallible, how are they ever going to want to show us that they can make a mistake and then make it right?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that is an absolute golden nugget for our young teachers who
Mm.
are just told that they've got to be perfect.
Mm.
No, you don't. You don't. And look, what that is amazing, and thank you for that. That's I couldn't have put it any better myself. So yeah, let's make mistakes and show how we make those decisions right. So next question. Or it could be. Do you have a statement, a design brief, a quote, a mantra that you, I guess, hold fast to, that you rely upon, maybe, or that something just resonates with you and has resonated with you?
This is one that came back with me from the Cooper Hewitt, and it's a D School quote. And the D School is the school in California, the design school, somewhere I actually want to study one day. And that is, we. Now I've got to get it right. We are smart. we are smarter than any of us.
Yep.
So we together are so much smarter than any one of us.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's something we really struggle at school to get kids working together. Have you ever tried to get teachers working together?
Oh, we are so siloed, it's
Oh,
ridiculous.
yeah. Yeah, no, we don't work together at all. It's just no. And if we can't, how are we going to teach our kids to?
Yeah, because because they don't look at what we say.
No,
They
they
look
look
at
at what
what
we
we do.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and if we can't get on, if we can't, communicate effectively, why should they? But yeah, we are smarter. Brilliant, brilliant. Now, it wouldn't be the Tattooed Teacher podcast without asking you, Stephen. Do you have any tattoos?
I am a total clean skin. Not even to the point where I have. Not even to the point where I've considered it. My stepson, fabulous young man, owns his own business, doing very well. Takes the occasional trip to Bali with his family, and has
Yep.
a cab driver that runs him around Bali when he's over there. Uses the same cab driver every time. He has his cab driver's signature tattooed on his foot, and his cab driver has his signature tattooed on his foot. So if I made some sort of a connection like that, I may consider it, but that's probably the only way I would consider a tattoo.
That's fantastic. And look, hey, I reckon I'd have to go back through every episode, but I reckon I'm running probably 50-50 between those who are tattooed and those who aren't. And even those who are just going, you know what? No, it's just not. And look, for me, tattoos are part of my self-expression. They're part of the way I show my creativity and the way I do, and the way I'm unique. And how I love to push some boundaries occasionally.
Yeah. I was reading a book at one point. The girl who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, I don't remember her name, but she was telling the story of her and a friend of hers who really went at it with tattoos on her body, and she was saying, "Hey, that's an awful lot. Aren't you concerned?" And a friend said, "But they're only temporary." I
That's a
suppose
great.
you think about it, they
It's a
are.
great way to look at it. It's a great way to
Yeah.
look. I'm going to have to steal that line. That's for sure. Because
Yeah.
I'm in all sorts of trouble from my mother-in-law, who blames me for all my children. All my three children are tattooed, and one of them exceptionally heavily.
Yeah.
And yet I'm still getting the blame for.
But you can't. Well, tell her this story. I'm a clean skin, and both of my daughters are tattooed. Okay,
Yeah.
so, and well, one of them was a sailor, so she didn't have an option.
No. Hey, yeah, absolutely. I'll pass that on. I'll pass that bit on to her for sure. Hey, and lastly, but certainly not least, if people want to get in contact with you, Stephen, what's the best way to do it?
Look, I like you, I'm a podcaster. I do the Data Queensland podcast. They can send me an email at podcast@dataqueensland.org.au, or you'll find me on LinkedIn. I'm there as well. And yeah, my current email will be gone very shortly that I use mostly. So they're probably the two best ways to find me.
Mate, I'll make sure I put those links in the show notes
Cheers.
so that people can reach out if they want to.
And
But
they're very
Stephen,
welcome to. I love having a chat.
yeah. Oh, look, this has been fantastic. And look, like I think I'm not sure if we said it on air or off air, but a couple of DT teachers together, I think we could probably talk for another hour at least.
Yep.
And there's so much that I actually wanted to cover tonight that we didn't get to, but in encompassing that, there's so much that we covered that has just, I think, touched on things that I'm just so glad we did cover. So I just want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for your experience. I want to thank you for your joy and your passion. And we do hear so many, unfortunately, so many negative stories about education. And part of the drive for this podcast, for my podcast, is to get stories like yours out there, to get that passion, to get that joy, for people to hear how much education impacts and brings value to life.
Beautiful. What a perfect way to end.
So, Stephen, thank you so much. You have a wonderful evening and a great end to the term. And I wish you all the very best for your move into the next chapter back in Brizzy. And hopefully we'll talk again real soon.
Cheers. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you so much for listening to the Tattoo Teacher podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and found it insightful. If you like what you heard, it would mean so much to me if you could either like, follow, and subscribe to whatever platform you are listening on. The music was by DJ Fruit Salad. Thanks again for listening. Stay cool. Be blessed.